APU. American Public University is proud to present The Everyday Scholar.
Hello, my name is Dr. Bjorn Mercer, and today we're talking to Dr. Chapla Verma about her new book, Lotus in the Desert. Welcome, Chapla.
Thanks for having me, Bjorn. This book is about Mahapajapati Monastery, and this deals with Theravada Buddhism. That's how it is.
Okay. No, I'm excited to hear about it. I know you and I have talked about your studies for years. I've always been interested in Buddhism, so let's jump into the first question. And so, what is this book about, and how you became interested in this topic?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second question first, how I became interested in this book. Actually, it's a kind of fun story. I was teaching a Buddhism course, graduate level course, and one student asked me, what does the word Mahapajapati means? And she had heard about this monastery. So I found it very interesting, and I started writing down about her question and just explained that Mahapajapati was Buddha's foster mother, and she was the first person to get ordained as a fully ordained nun. So in Pali, it is known as, the term is bhikkhuni. And with her, then she started a nun sangha, which is, with her, 500 women had also come. So they also ordained, but they were ordained by monks. And she was ordained by Buddha himself because she was his foster mother. So I wrote about all these things. And it did not come to her very easy, because when Buddhism started, then for first 5 years, they were only monks in the Sangha, their brotherhood. And in between, she asked twice to Buddha that I want to be ordained, and he refused. So when her husband, the king, passed away, then she came with 500 women. And then she asked him again, made a request. And with the initial reluctance, Buddha agreed. And what happened was that she was told to follow 8 rules, which are known as Garu Dharma. And those rules later on created problems for female monastics. So we'll talk about that a little later. So I wrote about all this to my student, and then I myself became very curious about this monastery. So I did some web search, and then I realized that it was in California, and it is very close to Joshua Tree National Park. And on the other side, it is also close to Army Base, where this student resided at that point. So there was some comparative religion course which was offered from a university, but was at that setting, and a nun had come to teach over there. So that's how she got to know about this monastery. And then one thing led to another, and then I went to this monastery. I visited it for the first time in 2013. That's a long time ago. And then I found these nuns very, very interesting because of their precepts and because of their life stories. They follow very interesting precepts and very difficult precepts. Like, they don't eat after noon. So lunch is their last meal, and they eat between 7 hours. So it begins in morning, and noon is the last meal. They don't eat any dinner. So when I started my research, then they were very kind, and they told me that, why don't you stay here? We have accommodation here. But then I thought about it, wow, I'll not get any dinner. So I decided to stay 6 miles away in Yucca Valley. And they also have very interesting stories because in this school of Buddhism, they do not allow women to become fully ordained nuns, bhikkhunis. So over and over, I kept on hearing about it. So I thought I really, really want to present their story so that people can hear it and understand their challenges and also their determination.
Thank you for giving a great overview of how you became interested in the book. And it's interesting I've always been interested in Buddhism. I've read a bit about, the Buddha, his origin 2,500 years ago. But in this country, I think we don't see Buddhism that often. I'm speaking generally. But it's so interesting to hear that in California and various other places. There's a place just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, that is like a little Buddhist temple. And if you look, and actually there's one just right down the street from me, you'll find them. Now, before we get to the next question, for the audience who's not as familiar with Buddhism or Buddhist nuns, is there any comparison to like Catholic nuns? So most people in the U.S. have an idea of what a Catholic nun is.
Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to compare two religions just because of the way it is practiced. I would say Mahayana Buddhism can be more comparable to Christianity because of their precepts, because in that form of Buddhism, that school of Buddhism, certain rules have been changed. So monks can work. They can sell their books. If they write books, they can use that money for their own center and on themselves. In certain ways, it is different also because in Zen Buddhism, they can also be married. Monks can be married. So actually, to understand this, it is better to look at the history of Buddhism, the way it spread. So when Buddha started teaching, it spread in India. And for first 5 years, there were only male monks. And then female lineage started. It spread all over India, and then it moved to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. So this is Theravada Buddhism, which is the original form of Buddhism, the way Buddha had taught. So even today, the same monastic rules are followed. So these are very difficult rules. And then it also went to China, Korea, Japan, came to US. So this is largely Mahayana school. So Mahayana school has went ahead and explained many things about which Buddha had remained silent. He remained silent about existence of God. He remained silent about existence of soul. He never denied, he never affirmed. He just remained silent because that was not the objective. The objective was to remove suffering. But then Mahayana school has developed a different philosophical thought and explained and expanded. And Theravada Buddhism remained the same. So when it reached Sri Lanka, it thrived and everything. And even today, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand are largely Theravada Buddhist countries. So majority of population follows this Buddhism, and they are also state religion. So they get a lot of benefits from government. And in 11th century in Sri Lanka and 14th century in Myanmar, it got the female and both male monastic lineage got extinct. So then some years later, they tried to revive it, and they found only male monastics who could revive the lineage, but they tried to find female monastics also, but they couldn't. So female lineage then remained broken for many years.
No, thank you. There's so much to learn about Buddhism, besides the fact that rich history in many, many different countries, the different parts of Buddhism, just like you talked about. The next question is, tell me something about the nuns you have interviewed for the book.
Yes, I interviewed quite a few nuns, and 3 of them kind of stood out. And so I'm just thinking which one should I talk about first. So I'll go ahead with the abbess of this monastery, who is, her Dhamma name is Ayagunasari. That's how she's known now. But in her lay life, she was Dr. Wynne, and she was an anesthetist. So when she always did a little bit of meditation. She was inclined in this kind of thing. She had some life experiences because of which she wanted to renounce the world. When she was 70 years old, and finally she retired from her job, and she also renounced the world. So she started following precepts, and then I would say a little later she got ordained in Sri Lanka as a seminary. So seminary, the word seminary means that this person is on a path of becoming a fully ordained nun. So in any, like you talked about Christianity, becoming a nun is not a big issue, right? Anybody who wants, they can become nun. But in this school of Buddhism, it is difficult because when female lineage broke down, then it could not be revived. And why it was not revived? Because there were no Theravada nuns to ordain new ones. So they came up with a process that female monastics will follow 8 precepts. So in Thailand, then they are known as Maichi. In Myanmar, they are Thelashin. And in Sri Lanka, they are known as Dishashil Mata. So they would just stay at that level and will never move ahead, no matter how much insight they acquire. So later on, maybe 800 years later, Sri Lanka and India tried to revive this ordination. So now ordination is going on, and few women have ordained as Theravada nuns, but Thailand and Myanmar, which are very influential countries in this respect, and their centers and monasteries are everywhere, all over the world, they don't recognize their status. So that is the problem. So Ayagunasari went to Sri Lanka to become seminary. So she became a seminary, and then she goes to Myanmar to do a retreat, meditation retreat for 2.5 months. And there she was told that you cannot wear seminary robe. You have to change it to a novice person's robe. So she was not very happy with that, but she changed and she completed her meditation retreat for 2.5 months. She came back to Sri Lanka and she was extremely unhappy. So she decided that I'm never going to go back to Myanmar till they change this rules about fully ordained nuns. And then she became fully ordained nun like Bhikkhuni, the seminary and Bhikkhuni. And then she came back to US, and few years later she became abbess of this Mahapajapati Monastery. And this monastery itself started in a very interesting way. One woman who was very interested in Theravada Buddhism, like the teachings and meditation, she donated 80 acres of land in Mojave Desert. So that's how this monastery came up. Another nun is Ayadeepa, and in her lay life she was Sandra K. West, and she was in army. So she had this desire to learn more about Buddhism, and when she started many years ago, maybe 35 years ago, there were not many Buddhist teachers, so her quest started with reading about books about Buddhism, and she did meditation retreats, and then she heard about Mahapajapati Monastery, and she started her training under Ayagunasari, and she became seminary, and then she became fully ordained. In 2012, she was ordained in LA. And who else I'm thinking? There's another very interesting person. She is Sachwadi, and she started her training when she was 19 years old. Her mother passed away suddenly. So she was very distressed. So she went and did 2 meditation retreats. Then she decided, I would like to renounce the world. And when she was 21 years old, then she became Thelashin. So Thelashin is 8 preceptor, which is allowed in Myanmar. So then she did something like 16 years of her training over there, came to Sri Lanka, and then she realized, okay, over here people can become fully ordained nuns. So she opted for it. But that thing, this decision of hers, made monks in Myanmar very angry. So they told her not to go ahead, but she went ahead. So she became seminary, and then she became fully ordained nun. And for 2 years she lived there, everything was fine. She thought monks have forgotten about her change of status. But her father was sick, so she came back to Myanmar to take care of him. And during that time, she took care of him for 2 months and everything was fine. Then she was asked by State Sangha Mahanayaka Committee, which falls under Ministry of Religious Affairs, that what was her intention, and she should come and explain. So then she was taken to one of their offices. They had a huge gathering over there. A lot of people were there. And on a loudspeaker, they were announcing that female Buddhist monks are illegal in modern Burma. They are criminals and enemy of Theravada Buddhism. And then she was given a sheet of paper where 4 requests were written. So first one was to bow to monks 3 times. And then it was to change her bhikkhuni robe to Thilashin's robe. So that means move to novice person's robe. And the third was to sign a document that she was foolish and wrong in doing this. And the fourth one was to say it aloud. So she fulfilled the 3 requests, but the fourth one where she had to say it aloud, she just could not bring herself to say that she was foolish and wrong in doing that, simply because she did not believe in that, right? So when she didn't do that, then she was arrested for non-compliance and she was tried in court. So when the judge heard her case, he had a tough time understanding what was the crime and why she has been arrested, because he had never seen any case of this kind. And then gradually he understood that becoming a fully ordained nun in Myanmar is illegal. So she was sentenced for 5 years in prison. And from court itself, she was sent to Instant prison. Over there, the officer who was filling up new prisoners' papers looked at her crime, and he was shocked because her crime was listed as impersonating as a monk. So then he looked at her and he told her that you have indeed offended somebody in powerful position. So she stayed in that prison and her stay was really difficult. And meanwhile, her siblings, people from other countries tried to get her out of that prison. So the influential monks by then realized that she was not trying to revive bhikkhuni lineage. She was just an ordinary person who wanted to become a bhikkhuni, and she did that. So then she was given another chance to fulfill those 4 requests which were made earlier. So this time she completed all of them, including the one where she had to say it aloud that I was foolish and wrong for doing this. So she was pardoned. And from court, she was taken to airport. She was put in an airplane which was headed to Sri Lanka. So she reaches Sri Lanka. And because this ordination is legal in Sri Lanka, so she went back to her monastery where she was living earlier. She wore a bhikkhuni robe and she started working on her PhD in Buddhism. Meanwhile, people from US got her visa and she moved to US. And here she met a local man who was also a Buddhist and who was on the board at Mahapajapati Monastery. So she renounced her robe and she married him. So at the time of my interview with her, she had already renounced. But what I realized during interviewing her was that whenever she would talk about her life in Sri Lanka or life in Myanmar as a nun, her eyes would brighten up. She would be so happy and delighted. So at the core, I think she was still a very devoted to Theravada Buddhism, but it was the treatment she got from her Dhamma brothers she had to renounce.
That is an amazing story. And, I think for most people who live in the United States, the idea of religious freedom is so ingrained here. The fact that you would be arrested for that is just, it boggles my mind.
Absolutely.
It's hard to imagine. And for anybody who is listening and doesn't know the history of Myanmar or Burma, look into it. It's been an authoritarian country for many, many decades, in which a lot of things that we just take for granted are illegal. And I'll say the country is still struggling today with a civil war, with that said. And it's very sad. Thank you so much. That's such a great story. I mean, I think one of the things we think about when we talk about nuns or people who dedicate themselves to lives, each of these people has a life before. They have a life during, and then where they're going to go in the future is all completely and very, very unique to them.
Yes, I want to add, Bjorn, there were a few things which really enamored me about these nuns, because these nuns symbolized compassion in the truest sense. A couple of them had many difficult experiences before becoming a nun and also as they were nuns, but they had only good words about everyone. And Ayadeepa, the one who was in army, later on she had cancer, and by the time I did my interview with her, she was in hospice. But she was determined. She was determined to do this interview because she just wanted people to know about her life. And it so happened that she sent me an email and she said, I should be the first one you interview. So when I went there, I just left all my luggage in hotel, and very same day I drove 6 miles and reached there and started interview with her. And she completed. She was very, very determined. And in the same way, she did her precepts also. And in this world where we are always busy buying stuff and so many material things we like to acquire, this concept of living in a very meaningful, simple life where you don't know from where donations will come, because this is a codependent system Buddha had created, that monastics will depend on donations and in return they will give teachings. But in US, where the neighboring people and community don't understand what these precepts are, it is very, very difficult.
No, thank you. I think for most Americans who are used to Christianity, of course, just by living here, you understand a lot of the concepts. And then going beyond that, there's a lot to learn about other religions of the world, even religions that are similar-ish. Use that in big quotes, and then other religions that Americans would view as different, such as Buddhism, but there's so much to learn and there's so much compassion. And so today we're talking to Chapla Verma about her new book, and we'll be back in just a moment.
At American Public University, we believe that higher education can unlock higher purpose. So we offer 200 modern programs for those who want to make a difference. And we believe education must adapt to students' needs. That's why we've made it accessible through online classes and flexible with monthly program starts. American Public University, within reach, without limits. Learn more at americanpublicu.com.
And we're back with Dr. Chapla Verma. And so far we've talked about your new book, Lotus in the Desert. We talked a little about the monastery and the nuns that you interviewed. And so the last question we have is, what are significant issues related to becoming a fully ordained nun?
So thanks, Bjorn, again. The major issue is how to become fully ordained nun, and then whether they get enough support from their parent organizations or not. So in this scenario, they don't get that support. So in Myanmar, it is still illegal to become a fully ordained nun. In Thailand, in 2002, they changed their law, and the Senate decided that they can become nuns, but they won't be ordained in Thailand. So they can go to other countries and ordain, come back. They can have temples, they can start a nunnery. All that is fine, but because the government does not recognize, the influential monks don't recognize their status, so they don't get the benefits which monks get. So their temples are not tax exempt. They don't get any special rebate when they are using public transport, which of course monks get, but at least they can live there, whereas in Myanmar it is illegal. So in Sri Lanka, which is also a very important Theravada country, they have moved ahead and they have started ordaining nuns as a fully ordained nun, a bhikkhuni. So it started in India in 1996, but that ordination was considered illegal. It was in Sarnath, and then next one was in Bodh Gaya in India. in 1998, and it was accepted as a legal ordination. So legal ordination means nuns from those schools which have similar precepts. So since there are no Theravada nuns, there is one school of Mahayana Buddhism, which is Dharmgupta school. So it came from India to China, and in China it is known as Mahayana Buddhism. But their precepts are very similar to Theravada nuns, so they helped. And currently the ordination which is happening, it is dual ordination. So 10 monks and 10 nuns will be present. Though, as I mentioned to you earlier, that initially when 500 nuns were ordained, they were ordained by bhikkhus on Buddha's order. And Buddha never rescinded that order. So technically they can be ordained by Theravada monks as well, but it is not happening. Yeah, so there are very small number of nuns who are from Theravada school, but they are all over the world now. And the interesting fact is that those Theravada monks who speak in favor of nuns are penalized. In Australia, there is one very well-known monk, Theravada monk, Ajahn Brahm, and they started a nunnery many years ago. And then in 2009, he observed full ordination. So few women became bhikkhunis in Theravada Buddhism. So his parent organization, which is Thai lineage, he's from Ajahn Chah lineage, they were not very happy. And they asked him to answer a few questions, and one thing led to another, and he was removed from his lineage. So they actually have to pay price for helping women. But he was not deterred. So far there are 2 more ordinations which have happened. So this is the situation. And then when, remembering what Ayadeepa told me, when she became a fully ordained nun, still she went to Tathagat Nunnery to do a meditation retreat. And this is from Myanmar. So this is Mahasi tradition, Theravada Buddhism. So over there they don't accept bhikkhuni status. So they treat everybody as a novice. So on which day you have received precepts, that is more important than for what you have been ordained. So the moment she reached there, she was treated as a novice nun. So that was a little tough for her. Another place she went to attend a talk, and that was a Thai center. So there was a raised platform where monastics were supposed to sit. All ordained, fully ordained monastics were, so monks and nuns were supposed to sit there. So she went and sat there facing lay people. And very soon somebody tapped on her shoulder and told her that you cannot sit here. So she said, why? So they told her, no, it is only for monks. So then she had to get up from there, and then she went and sat with lay people facing the monks. So you can see that their situation is not very stable. Where they go, whom they meet, changes the level of acceptance. So it's very fluid, it's difficult to handle for these women.
Yeah, I can see that. No, thank you for sharing. And it's interesting hearing about that because you're crossing country lines. And then how the status of nuns within each of those countries, like you said, is different from here to there. And that would be very frustrating, challenging, because you're like, I am a nun. I can help people out. But they basically saying, no, you're not. And the monks are the ones who are in charge, are the ones who will guide when the nuns can also help guide.
Yes, absolutely. And you have raised a very important point, because for monks, it is generations of knowledge coming straight from Buddha, which has been transferred from teacher to disciple. But for nuns, it's not there, So they are at a disadvantage that way. And there are a few other issues which started at the time of Buddha had given 8 Garu Dharma to Mahapajapati Gautami, his foster mother. various different opinions about it, but one of them says that a nun, even if she is 100 years old, she would give homage to a new monk by standing up and bowing. So sometimes it is taken in a literal sense that this is what nuns have to do, so that their status from Buddha's time was very much lower than monks. But the thing is that we find a reference where few monks had very unseeming behavior in front of nuns. And when nuns complained, then Buddha said that you do not have to give homage to monks. So whatever rules he made, none of them were static. It depended on the situation, how the situation was, and he would change it. So then there are certain things on which these rules have kind of become very rigid, where they should not be that way.
Really, really great comments. And I really like what you said, how the rules have become rigid when they really shouldn't be that way. And I think you can apply that to pretty much every religion out there. Ideally, I should say. But absolutely wonderful conversation. Today we're talking to Dr. Chapla Verma about her new book, Lotus in the Desert. Any final words, Chapla?
Yes, I just want to include why I wanted to write this book. Because earlier my all research was about Zen Buddhism, which is Mahayana Buddhism. And it was simply meeting these nuns at Mahapajapati and just getting to know how this monastery evolved, that one woman who was interested in Theravada Buddhism saw this need that these nuns need abode. They have no place to stay. Their parent organization does not recognize them. So she donated 80 acres of land. And then they got other donations. They have bought something like 20 more acres of land. So now it started with a very small nunnery, and then it became much bigger. Now they have a lot more construction. Also that their precepts are so difficult, and by teaching about Buddhism, they show their dedication. And people can also see that nothing is achievable without a dedication, In order to achieve something like mental tranquility, you have to do meditation religiously. So these are the things, their compassion, their life stories, and their dedication towards the religion, because all these precepts are not easy. They cannot even drive cars if they follow precepts correctly. And this is what I had seen, that they follow their precepts very diligently. They have a belief that Buddha came up with 311 precepts for nuns, and there is a reason behind it. So if they follow those precepts correctly, they will be enlightened. So I also wanted to present their story in their own words so that people can see their aspiration and they can also understand their challenges.
Well, absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing about your book. And today we're talking to Dr. Chapla Verma about her new book, Lotus in the Desert. And thank you for a great conversation. And of course, my name is Dr. Bjorn Mercer.
For more information about our university, visit us at study@apu.com. APU, American Public University.